Welcome back to week 3 for the course Introduction to Human-Computer Interaction. What I'm going to do now is to walk you through some of the documents and some of the information that you'll have to prepare for actually doing user studies. So there's a huge set of requirements or needs now which is coming up. If you were to do any human subject study where you're collecting data from end users, where you're collecting users to use the systems, it has become necessary for doing this IRB approval. IRB stands for Institution Review Board, but I think in India there is Ethics Committee, there is Ethics Review Committee. There are many different forms of the same entity called IRB. And the main purpose of this IRB is to actually look at the information that you're presenting to them about what study you want to do, what information you want to collect, how will you collect the information, who will be the end users, all of that information. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to first walk you through all the necessary information that you need to create a IRB application. And I'll also show you a sample consent form, which you can probably use for the studies that you will end up doing. And remember, this is not only necessary for academicians or researchers. This is important for industry too, because if anything goes wrong, it will be necessary for somebody to protect you as the administrator of the study and the participant of the study. So it is better to have some level of approvals for doing the human subject study, user study, data collection from users, all of that. So I've listed here 5 different topics. The first one is a small training program that you should undergo to get the information about how to do these human subjects. It's a very short content you go through, and if you finish the content, they'll ask you some questions, and if you answer it, the questions are also very, very subjective. So depending on your answer, at the end of it, they'll give you a certificate, which you'll have to actually attach it when you're doing this IRB approval. And whatever I'm going to show you, I did it personally myself during my grad school, and these are the applications. These are the proposal application consent form flyers and the certificate that I had during my grad school. So it'll give you a real world application with real information on how you can actually write the IRB application and get it approved. So let's go to the first one. So this is the link that is in the slide, which is on protecting human research participants, NIH's Office of Extramural Research. So it's basically a place where you can go sign up, go through the content, and get your final certification. So once you have the certificate, you can actually submit the application with this certificate. I'll show you an example of the certificate also. Here is an example of a certificate. When you're done with the content from the website, from NIH's website, you should be able to have this completion certificate like this. The reason why you want to have this completion certificate is whenever you're applying for your IRB approvals, you should actually present saying that I'm done with the content. I know the content about how to conduct human subjects research. Now let me show you the second one, which is a flyer. This is an actual flyer that I used during my data collection. Let's see what all this flyer has and how you can actually reproduce it in any of the studies and data collection that you are doing. 70 minutes interview, get paid $20. Research group at Carnegie Mellon University is conducting a 70-minute user study. Qualification for participation, must have an email account, ability to travel to Carnegie Mellon's campus, be at least 18 years old, $20 payment upon completion, and then there is a stub that is kept at the end where you will cut it in between the 2 stub, which is 70-minute interview, $20, contact, some email address, right? You cut it and keep it. You kind of paste this flyer around wherever you are looking for collecting, getting users, and when the users are interested in study, they'll take the stub, email it, email the person mentioned in this stub, and coordinate for the user study. There are many mechanisms by which you can actually get participants. One of the mechanisms is like this, which is a typical way of putting a flyer. But other than that, there are campuses or portals where you can actually talk about, ask for participants. And there's, of course, Mechanical Turk now. And there are many portals like this where you can recruit participants. Now, let me walk you through the proposal which you have to prepare for getting the IRB approval. Again, this is only an indicative. This is not the only kind of document, only kind of proposal that you can write. This is the kind of proposal that I had written. So I'm just sharing with you how a proposal for IRB approval is done. Essentially, as I said, what is the main goal for the IRB committee is to check whether this is the only way to collect data, and how are you collecting the data, who are the participants, what kind of data is being collected. So in the proposal, first you basically describe a summary of the study, so to say. This study investigates why people fall for phishing scams. That's my kind of work. We described how we are going to, what is this study all about, right? We want to test how effective standard email security notices are. We plan to conduct this study with people who are non-technical and novice in the area of security. And these findings will help us understand how people make online decisions. We plan to show about 20 emails for subjects to make decisions. No personal information will be collected during the study. Right? So that's the kind of meaning. I'll make this document also publicly available for inside the course mailing list. But the point I want to get across with showing the proposal is at least the first part is talking about a summary of the study. What is the study all about? So then, how subjects will be utilized? What kind of subjects are you planning to get? So around 20 people in and around CMU and University of Pittsburgh will be interviewed for the study. Subjects will be shown about 20 emails, and they should take no longer than 70 minutes, right? So that's the kind of information that you're giving to the in the proposal. Here is some important piece of information, which is that how are you going to protect the confidentiality of the information that you're collecting? I think I briefly also mentioned in the last lecture that I would recommend when you're collecting data about the users to keep the username, which is Purnarangam Kumaraguru in this case, away from the data that you're collecting, so that there is some kind of a random number or some number that you have, alphanumeric digits that you have, which is reference to me and not necessarily my own name. During the interview, no personally identifiable information like name, address, etc. will be collected. One group of subjects will receive one set of emails, and the other group. So this, I think I will cover this later, which is a concept called how do you design a study, which is within a design and between design studies. We'll actually cover this later, but all subjects will be asked the same set of pre and post experimental questions from the same protocol. So some new terms are coming in. I'll just briefly tell you what they are, right? So pre and post experiment, which is before actual study, actual experiment, you're going to ask them some questions, and when the experiment is done, you're going to ask them some questions. That's the pre and the post. And the same protocol, the word protocol is referred to basically about the questionnaire questions that you're asking the participants. The subjects will be chosen upon agreement of the subject. The interviews, transcript, audio files, and the study results will be treated as follows to maintain confidentiality. Only authorized members of the research group, basically protecting the data. So hopefully you get the point that the information is not, the data that you collected is not accessible to anybody and everywhere. Subjects will be officials authorizing access to subjects. Subjects will be recruited from general population of Pittsburgh living in and around CMU and University of Pittsburgh who are non-technical, and also some group of students from CMU and UP will be recruited. So then we describe what kind of risks are for these kind of studies, and particularly there are, meaning when I show you the application, you will actually see that there are broadly three kinds of studies, where one is minimal risk, medium risk, and very high risk. Majority of the studies that we do in this kind of thing, in this kind of topic, like security and computer science, is going to be mostly minimal risk. there is no foreseeable physical or psychological risk to the subjects. The specific objective of the user study is to understand how people make use of emails and see if they read the security announcements. So that's the goal of benefit for doing the study. The study will also teach the subject how not to fall for different security attacks. The findings will identify methods to build systems to train users falling from different security attacks. The ultimate goal of this research is to develop tools such as new email applications. Right? So that's the kind of explanation that you're giving what the benefits are. Subject recruitment. Subjects will be recruited by posting flyers around CMU and University of Pittsburgh for recruiting people who are not technology savvy. So the point that I showed you first, the flyer is this, right? When I mean flyer, here is the flyer that I showed you earlier with stubs and way to contact to be part of the study. And we plan to use the sample questions given here for screening the subjects for the study. I'll show you the survey questions in a few minutes, but that's the information that we're presenting in the subject recruitment category. So here is the sample for pre and post experimental questions. There are many types of questions that you can ask in the pre and the post. One of the reasons why you definitely want to have a pre-experiment questions is to actually recruit people or decide people who will participate in your study. You could just use this as a screening questions where you can say that, okay, I need participants who are of this category, which is male, age 20 to 25, studying engineering in engineering colleges and doing this sort of thing, or have this type of experience. On average, how many total emails do you receive per day? Right? These are the questions that I asked in my pre-questions. And post questions is ask if they have any comments or suggestions, if they didn't understand the cues or information provided. So basically, one of the other thing that you will see later in the lectures also is this idea of debriefing. Debriefing is super important while doing the user studies. We'll get into details about debriefing later, but for now, these are the kinds of questions or comments that you can make during the debriefing that you're doing. Sample consent form. So we'll come back to the sample consent form again. So what are the things that will come back? We'll come back to the survey questionnaire, consent form. Human subjects clearance request, the one I just now showed you, which is you have to go through the NIH training, have the certificate, and basically you put that certificate with the application. So that gives you a sense of what the IRB application is. In general, I think having these kind of applications, these kind of proposals written is very, very sound, because I think the ethics committee, the IRB committee gets a very good insight on what the study is going to be, what kind of data you're going to collect, so they can actually make a judgment. So the main reason about why these kind of proposals, applications, processes being created is because there have been in the past studies that have been done where data has been collected and it has had effect on the users and negative effects on the users also. So that's one of the reasons why such kind of processes and such kind of requirements have been imposed now, that when you do human subject study, you're supposed to be collecting you're supposed to be having these kind of proposals written, consent form, which actually describes what the study is. I'll show you that consent form again. So that describes what the proposal is. I'll show you later about the consent form, survey questionnaire application that we'll actually develop for writing the proposal package. Now that we've seen the IRB proposal document, let me walk you through the IRB application form. Why is this application important? As I said before, the application is important because it describes the kind of data that you want to collect, describes how you plan to use the data, describes the kind of way that you will actually use this data for doing the analysis. This is an application that I used during my data collection. So I'm just walking you through the exact application that I actually used. So initially it's all more administrative purposes, starting date, end date, who's the investigator who will have access to the data. If you see, this is the summary of the study that we'll plan to do. It's probably the same as the first few paragraphs that we had in the proposal. So here it says this study investigates why people fall for phishing scam, as well as how effective various interventions are at educating people about these scams. We want to test how effective standard email security notices are, where companies send notifications to people warning them of phishing scams. So essentially, it is building on the phishing study that I was doing. We plan to conduct the study with people who are non-technical or novices in the area of security and privacy. So that's the kind of subjects. Again, this is just a summary. Here are some important things that you want to actually keep in mind while applying or while actually creating these kind of forms in your own institutes or wherever you want to apply this kind of information. What is the age range of the subjects, right? Generally, you want to actually mention that what is the age group that you want to collect the data from. How many subjects of the subject studied, what will be the ratio of male and female. One of the things that the IRB or the ethics committee is looking for is the distribution of the gender data that you're collecting. Usually you want to mention that it's 50-50, and it's actually good for your even study that if you have male and female 50-50 distribution. It's going to be hard, but if you keep it 50-50, the kind of conclusions can be more concrete. Of the subjects studied, what percentage of them would be minority groups? So all this is basically trying to look at what kind of data you're collecting and what are the sample that you're studying. Are the subjects capable of understanding the nature of study and consenting process? What is the population source of subjects to be studied? Indicate how subject recruitment will be performed. So if you go back, if you remember, I showed you about the flyer. So I have it here: existing in investigators files, email or web-based, external advertising to TV publication postings, which is flyer. And particularly the IRB and ethics committee is looking for that the subjects that you're going to collect data from are not vulnerable, so to say. So here, if you see the categories of questions or the options that is given are students or minors, subjects with compromised mental status, hospitalized or institutionalized subjects, pregnant women, fetuses, prisoners, subjects requiring certificate of confidentiality. So the idea is that if you're going to collect data from these kind of participants, the kind of evaluation for the application will be slightly different. What the application that I have is more like a minimal risk study, and I was just collecting about emails, so it probably does not have too many risks attached to it. Just imagine if you were to do a medical study, that is, if you were to, develop a new tablet for some disease and you want to test it on human beings, you want to give them the medicine, see them after a couple of days, take some tests and look at the results and things like that. In that case, the IRB is going to actually look at your application more seriously and make sure that the kind of data that you're collecting, the kind of participants that you're collecting data from are actually protected in some way. Here are the other set of questions. If a clinical study, will a placebo or placebo procedure be used? And so again, these are all more details about the kind of subjects. Are the subjects paid for entering the study? If yes, what is the amount? Are other inducements planned to recruit subjects? And so here is what, if you remember, I mentioned one thing about the kind of study or the kind of risk that is associated with it, which here it says indicate degree of research physical risk to subject, indicate degree of research psychological risk to subject. This is one critical piece of information that you want to keep in mind while doing these kind of human subject studies. What is the kind of risk level that you're putting the subjects into, which is the subjects are going to have only minimal risks just by looking at emails, whereas they may have high risk if you're going to give them, let's take a tablet or medicine and study something about how it is what is happening inside the body. So this is a simple definition of minimal risk. Risk is minimal where the probability and magnitude of harm or discomfort anticipated in the proposed research are not greater in and of themselves than those ordinarily encountered in daily life. A risk is high when a moderate to high probability of serious adverse effects might occur as a result of participation in the research study. Right? And then it says about different people involved in the study, and then the application ends there. I really think that in India, when we do study, we should actually start looking at these kind of ethics board, IRB ethics committee to be more serious, to make sure that at least there is some kind of sanity check in the kind of data that is being collected. And particularly in computer science, particularly where technology is involved, it's probably nice to have these kind of protection. And if you're a researcher, the conferences and journals have started asking this regularly now, that you have to present your IRB approval documents to the conference and journal for them to actually accept your paper. I hope that gives you a sense about what an IRB application is. Now let's look at the last document that I wanted to share in this sequence of documents about IRB approvals. So this is the consent form. What is a consent form? Consent form is something when you take part in a study, you're basically provided information about the study, how the data will be used, and as a participant in the study, you're signing up for saying that I'm okay with participating in the study. This is like end user's license agreement, right? When you're downloading an app, it shows you a bunch of text and you're agreeing to download the app and use it. It's the same thing. You're agreeing to be part of the study is by signing on this consent form. The way that this consent form will be presented is that this draft is presented to the IRB. IRB approves the consent form and they actually sign it at the end, at the bottom right or bottom left, and then you take the photocopy of this particular signed copy of the IRB approval consent form, and you take the signature of the participant in the consent form. So this does not have to be in the physical form. It could be even in the online world. You could put the consent form and then have an agree button. When they click on the agree button, it is assumed that the participant is agreeing to be part of the study. Let me tell you what are the important things that you want to actually keep in the consent form. I think consent form is a good idea, even if you don't have a IRB requirement or an ethics approval requirement. It's always a good idea to have a consent form while you're talking to a user. So you can actually use the data. You can actually take a picture of the user and use the picture in your, let's take slides, report, other places. And recordings that you do, you can probably play it in other places and show it to people, video recording and everything like that. So it's a good idea to have a consent form signed by the participant. So here it says about the project title, principal investigator who are involved. This study has been approved by so-and-so, purpose of the study. See, if you look at it, these lines are basically a condensed version of what is in the proposal and application. The researchers want to understand how people manage online tasks, interview procedure. This is what will happen. 20 emails will be shown to you and you have to react to it. Compensation approximately will take about 70 minutes and we'll pay you $20. Risks or discomforts. The experience is expected to be inherently interesting and a generally positive experience. There will be no cost to participating other than your time. Research benefits. The specific objective of the study is to characterize how people think and do while doing online tasks. And benefits. The findings will identify things that people look for while making decisions. The ultimate goal of this research is to develop tools. Again, it's a text from the proposal, right? By no means should you feel forced to participate in this interview. You can withdraw your consent and stop your participation in the interview now or at any time without affecting your relationship with the university or the organization and without loss of any benefits to which you may otherwise be entitled. Confidentiality. I understand that the interviews, transcript, audio files, and the study results will be treated as follows. Same thing from the confidentiality section of the proposal. I understand that by giving my consent, I give so-and-so under associates permission to present this work in written and or other forms for teaching or presentations to advance the knowledge of science and or academia with it. So basically this is the reason why you want to get this sign, because it is clearly stating that the data, the pictures that you're taking, the transcription that you will make from the interviews can actually be used for other reasons. If you have any questions about the study, you should feel free to ask them before the interview, blah, 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 and there's some contact details there. Right. So this helps to wrap up this part about IRB application, and I will actually later follow up on why these things are more important now in terms of doing user studies. With that, I'll wrap the content for the first part of the week 3, where I'm just describing about different documents that are needed for IRB approvals, basically for doing user studies.